Hi guys, and welcome to my little creative space. Today we're doing Monster Jar Part 2. We have already completed Monster Jar Part 1, which was the lid, and Part 2 is the base of the jar. I was really proud and happy about how this jar lid turned out previously, so check out that video, link will be in the description. I am going to go in and tweak the lid slightly after, but that will be in Part 3, which is now going to happen. So there are two things that I'm not entirely, yes, that is two things that I'm not entirely happy with in this lid jar, which is I used PVA glue instead of resin because I didn't have any. I'm not sure if I entirely like how it came out, but it has a few little raised whitish areas from the glue. When I made the teeth, I had black polymer clay hands, so I have a few black fingerprint marks on my teeth. I might address that in part 3 as well. So I'm only bringing the clay up halfway up this jar. I'm not covering the entire jar like I first thought I might. I am leaving a gap of glass so you can see into it. And you'll find out why in part 3, which will be in the description when it is posted. Will it work? I don't know. Let's figure this out together. So let's get going. I am using black polymer clay. It is Make and Bake. And it's the same black clay that I use for the top of the jar. I do have 2 packets this time because there's a lot more going on in the base. Will it be enough? I really don't know. However, I have some polymer clay Make and Bake in beige, which I might be able to use. Will it work? I don't know. I don't know at this point. We could combine the two, or I could just use the beige and paint over the top with black, which is not entirely what I want to do because it would be different to the lid, so I want to keep it as close as possible. I have some floral wire. This is the harder version, and I have some flimsy version, which I'm not sure I'm going to use, but it's there just in case. And the trusty, oh my gosh, dirty, dusty, ew, toothbrush. It's had a workout from last time when I used it in the mouth to get the mouth texture. Yeah, watch your finger in there, he might bite you. And of course, we cannot forget the trusty extra large aluminium foil. Oh, don't blind the people. So I made a few mistakes throughout this video. When I say a few, I mean a lot of mistakes throughout this video. At the start mainly. So I'm going to put a quick montage-ness of me making terrible mistakes because I did not know how to start this jar off. So I scrapped all that. I have decided to just wrap the whole jar in the base of the clay. Now the reason why I was doing the foil before was because I'm not sure if this jar will last a trip in the oven. It's glass. It cracks. This is a canning jar. It's meant to go in hot water. However, my partner poured hot water over one once and it cracked completely. I mean, that was from cold to boiling hot instantly. So my plan was to be able to pull the jar out and glue it in later. This way we are hoping that when this jar goes in the oven, it doesn't crack. Now, you really need to make sure that all the air bubbles are out, and there was a lot of air bubbles. So I'm using my trusty toothpick and basically popping the bubbles and then smooshing it back down again. And it was actually handy to be able to see inside the jar for this because you could see where the air bubbles were. So I did that all around the jar. It took quite a long time, but it's really important to do that step. And then I've grabbed some of that wire that I may have already tried to use as legs and then removed. So I've pulled them all off individually this time, and I'm attaching aluminium foil around it in the basic shape of like a tentacle leg. I'm not putting a lot of detail in, just fat one end, skinny the other. And then I'm trying to hook the wire over so the clay has something to hold on to later. And I'm also recycling the foil from before because, hey, waste not, want not. It did make it more difficult for me in doing that because it was thick and weird and crazy and it didn't bend as much as I'd like it to. But I really didn't want to waste the foil. I don't like wasting things. So once I've got the foil on the wire, I basically shape it to the direction I want the foot to go. And I'm kind of lining it up with the jar as I go, so I can get an overall view of how the legs are going to look, how far out they come, and I do alter it throughout the video because sometimes I don't like it, or it's not working, or the jar became too sort of wide. So then I've rolled out some black clay in my trusty pasta makey rolly machine thing. Really enjoyed that, so much better than having to roll it by hand. And I've just pulled little bits off and I'm like folding it over the wire. As I said, there's no science to it. I didn't know if it was going to look good. I just did it. I think that's what you have to do with polymer clay. You just have to do it. Because it doesn't look right until you do it. So I'm folding and I'm pinching and I'm smushing until the entire piece is covered, except for that little end bit, which we'll get to later when we actually attach it to the jar. It's basically just blocking out the shape and then smoothing it out and fiddling with it for who knows how long. I fiddled with each one of these legs until you get the shape you want. And then it's basically rinse and repeat. Now obviously each leg's slightly different shape, which caused slightly different issues of getting clay on, but it all worked out. Now I could have pre-baked these legs, but I didn't want to because I needed to add texture and I wasn't sure quite what texture I was going for. I knew I wanted it to be similar to the lid, but I didn't know if I was going to add things to it or not. And because of the wire, I wasn't so afraid of knocking them like I did with my polymer clay figurine. I was paranoid about that, so I pre-baked it. So I just set them aside so I could play with them a little bit after. And then I rolled out some more black. Now, as I showed you at the start, I only had the 2 little packets, and I was beginning to realize how much I was actually going to need. How much I was actually going to need. Words. And so I rolled some of that beige clay through it, and now I did this little bit by little bit so I wouldn't alter the black too much. It was very slightly lighter or grey compared to the legs, but it's something that you don't notice. Well, I didn't notice. Don't notice it, please. Don't point it out. I don't need to know. But it gave me that little bit of extra clay to be able to do this instead of having to go buy more. Once I got that clay wrapped around, it was then I started attaching the legs. Oh, the fun of attaching the leg. So I've used bacon bond to make sure they adhere. Started covering it with the clay that was there. And then I've got little balls of clay that I've then added around it to hide the other part of the wire, so where the wire meets the leg, I guess, and then to cover it. Now, I probably used too much wire. I have a habit of that. The wire kept wanting to pull away from the jar or poke through the jar, so it was a lot of fiddling. I sort of had to leave the clay to harden a little bit and go back and add more. Once I got it on though, things were working well. This is the one leg that I didn't like, and it happens to be the first one I put on, but purely only because I attached the back of it to the actual clay, and none of the other legs are like that themselves, and you'll see near the end. But I love it. And then we attached all of them, and I don't think I need to show you that. It was such a long drawn out process, but I did the same method of just pushing the wire in, covering it with clay, smoothing it all out until I got this. And it doesn't look too bad. I'm pretty happy with it. It needs some texture and it needs some work and to play around with those legs because they don't quite look properly. Alright, who knows. So then I just got my trusty paintbrush and I'm smoothing out the edges. I was going to roll it up, but then I wanted to have a kind of a roughish look. So I've just smoothed it up with my finger, and I don't care if it's not even. And I've got it as like thin as possible, and then I've got my toothbrush and I've just given it a bit of texture around the top of it where the glass meets the clay. Then I've pulled out my trusty toothpick. Close-up shots, much better. Will not focus. Why won't you focus? And then I've gone around just like the jar lid and I started scratching lines all over it for a leathery kind of texture. Now I know it could kind of be an octopus and could have suckers and different looking skin, but I wanted to go with a leathery skin. So once I had done that, I just then grabbed the last, and I just had enough clay, I was so happy, to cover up the very bottom of the jar. And then again, it was a matter of smoothing and pushing and poking and getting rid of air bubble. I got the trusty paintbrush again, and I've used the end of it to basically poke little, I don't know what texture that is, bumpy textures into the bottom of it. I've then used the toothpick to draw some lines so that bumpy texture meets the sort of wrinkled leather texture quite nicely. I've lost part of my paintbrush on the clay again. So once I had done all that, I have put it in the oven, and oh my gosh, I was so proud. It did not break. I was so paranoid. I did leave it in the oven to cool down before I even touched it because I thought the glass might shatter, but it did not break. I was so happy. So I've just given it a spray of matte varnish or matte sealer over the top, just like I did with the jar lid. And here is the finished product. Well, there's a part 3, so it's not entirely finished yet. My ideas for part 3 is to put something inside the jar so you can see inside the jar. This is a display piece. You could stop here and just use it as a functioning jar. However, I'm giving it to my partner. He said display piece. So I'm going to be putting things inside. So stay tuned for part 3 and see what we do to the inside of this jar monster. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you next video.